All right. Welcome to the Super Canine Show. I'm your host, William Chandler-Duff. Today, I'm honored to be joined by an absolute legend in the dog training world, Larry Krohn. If you're struggling with your dog, Larry is one of the best dog trainers that you can learn from. Larry Krohn is the author of everything you need to know about e-collar training. His YouTube channel has over 140,000 subscribers and over 800 videos dedicated to helping the everyday dog owner. He's also created multiple courses on sitstaylearn.com and teaches seminars worldwide. You can also visit his website, packmasters.com, for in-person training, board and train programs, and virtual advice. Larry, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the Super Canine Show.
Thanks, William. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. That was a very nice intro. Little too kind. I'm definitely not a legend, but I appreciate the kindness. Glad to be on here.
No, I certainly think you are. I'm going to jump into the deep end here.
Yeah.
We'll start with, how important is play to you as a dog trainer?
Oh, we're jumping right into questions, right? I like it.
Yeah.
I like it. It's non-negotiable, you know, and lately I've been discussing it more and more because listen, it's great. It's great that more people are starting to understand not just the power of it, but why it's so vital and so necessary, you know, and you know, there's been people long before me that have been pushing it, you know, the Ivans, the Michael Ellises, and more recently, J-Jack has really been phenomenal and letting people see the importance and really providing that education. And I've always played with my dogs, like always. Like you can go back to the first videos I ever put out 17, 18 years ago. It was a big part of what I did, but hopefully I've gotten much better and understand it to a much deeper level, you know, and I think a lot of people that are for it and trying to implement it and make it a big part of their training programs still don't understand all the little details and the whys and the hows, you know. But then again, you have people on the other side who just crap on it and think it's some new fad or something because they don't understand it. The problem is when people assume they know something, right? They just make a lot of assumptions that aren't true. And so for me, once you can get a dog to give that to you, to truly want to interact with you in a way that we hope for or try to get them to be, everything else is easy. Everything else is cake. And it's nice to see, like I said before, so many more people jumping on. But again, there's still a lot of misunderstanding. There's a big difference in utilizing play to all its benefits and using a toy or play as a reinforcer. That's where so many people get confused. And that's not what we're talking about. And actually, in the past couple of days, we've had some good conversations. Some of the posts and videos I put out going deeper into that, because you'll get people that agree with you and say, oh yeah, I do this too. I stopped using food and now I reward with a ball. That's not what we're talking about. Like you're missing 99% of what we're trying to get across here, you know? So that's a very long-winded answer to your question. It's everything. It's non-negotiable. It has to be part of what we do with dogs.
Yeah, I've seen some of your posts lately on Facebook. They've been very good, and we're going to get to exactly what your post was about play. I think it was you use food to teach all obedience behaviors with your dog first, and then you move on to play.
Yeah, I'm not anti-food. I use plenty of food in dog training. You understand? The problem is, look, I've been doing this a really long time, 28 years. And I've learned from some of the best out there over the years, but my best education has been probably doing the seminar circuit for the past 10 years. You know, I've been in front of a few thousand people over the past 10 years just in seminars, and you get to see where people struggle, what people do, where they fail, where they succeed. And when it comes to food, in my opinion, it's the most overused tool that we have because it's easy for people to do. The same way it's easy for people to push a button on an e-collar and that becomes obsessive also. It's super easy for people to shove food in the dog's mouth, but it's worse in many ways because it makes the human feel good. And it becomes a very selfish thing. And when the human feels good, they're going to keep doing it and doing it and doing it, and then it loses its value. Like it could be so valuable when used correctly and then work at getting the dog away from it. But people continue to use it for the life of the dog and they use it for everything. The dog does something it's supposed to just do and they want to celebrate and give it a big party and feed. And then when the dog does do something that's worth making a big deal about, you make the same big deal, but it doesn't matter to the dog because it's used to it. You know what I mean? It's just so used to the exaggeration of the human's attitude and willingness just to feed them,
Yeah, I totally agree. So with the play versus food, or toys, play, and food, what's the reason why you use food? Well, why you prefer to use food to teach new obedience behaviors versus using play and, say, negative reinforcement or some kind of physical manipulation?
Yeah. So if we're talking puppies, right? Puppies live through their bellies. They want to follow you. They want to be with you. They'll eat anything. And food is very motivating for a puppy. And it's easy to use and it's easy to acquire a lot of repetitions with the things you're trying to work on. It's easy to get precision too with the behaviors. Not saying you can't with toys or play, but with a lot of dogs, it's going to be much, much more difficult, and it's why many of the best trainers on the planet at the top of the sport dog world use a lot of food in training. I think it's insane not to, but that's just me, and when I get a video, someone sends me like an online client and I ask for a couple of specific videos. One of them is doing obedience with food. One of them is playing, preferably tug. And when I get a play video and I ask someone, okay, why are you doing that? What's the purpose of the play? What's your goal? What are you trying to achieve? You get the same answers. Well, I'm trying to wear my dog out and make him tired. Or I just want my dog to have fun. Or the most common one is I'm trying to build a relationship. Okay, that's fine. But it's the same answers always. And sure, all those things are true, but they're small byproducts of the overall picture, if you ask me. They don't understand that in that play, we can build our whole communication system, like truly establish our whole communication system, our words, our markers, the things we need the dogs to know. And we also get to set rules and boundaries and enforce them, right? Most people want to teach no. Well, let me take that back. Most people don't teach what no means, right? But then most people try to utilize no when the dog's at its worst. Let's say in the middle of an aggressive episode or he's reactive on the leash. That's where they try to introduce or teach no. It's insanity. And when we play with our dogs in a productive way, in a competitive way, in a way that the dog thrives, that is a perfect place to teach no, right? To reinforce those rules and boundaries that we set. Simple ways. A dog going to grab the tug from you without permission is a very, very powerful way to take a learning moment for that dog to teach him, hey, that's unacceptable. You can't do that. And when he backs up, it's a great way to give feedback. Hey, good job. That's what I'm looking for. Right. So the learning that takes place in the moment when the dog's having a great time, they're not training. They don't know they're training. They just think they're doing something awesome with you. Okay. It's a massive, massive benefit that makes the totality of everything you have to do with the animal so much easier and so much faster.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. You can really, with play, You know, you're not only building a really solid relationship, but you're setting the groundwork for everything else that's going to come later. And
Sure.
yeah, it's fantastic. Um, so the reason why you use food, and I'm guessing that the reason why you use food over play in the initial stages of teaching new obedience behaviors is because every dog is motivated to eat food.
Not every dog. Not every dog. There's some dogs that
Right.
have
Yeah.
no interest in food. And you know, it's funny because for a lot of trainers, when they encounter those dogs, they panic and
Mm.
like they just want to get the dog to want to take food. So they'll withhold food from the dog until they're so
Yeah.
hungry they have no choice. I don't do that. I have no interest in that.
No,
You understand?
absolutely the same.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
if a dog has no interest in food, well, I'm not going to try to force it on him because it's not rewarding. You know,
Right.
then I'm
Yeah.
going to
Yeah.
train with the leash and a collar. But for me, like many people, especially many people in the sport world, if I'm going to teach, you know, a fast down or, you know, pop it into a competition style heel,
Mm.
maybe I'm just not good enough to do that through play and toys, but I'm going to get a lot of really good repetitions in with that food motivated dog. Now, my dogs happen to be extremely food motivated. I wish they were a little less food motivated, but
Yeah.
also insanely highly play motivated, much more than the food.
Mm.
You know,
Yeah.
so if I'm working on a competition heel with Dante, I get a lot of good, clean repetitions in using food, using luring and marking. But then, of course, once he has a good concept of it, I get rid of the food. Now I'm going to jump into using what he loves even more than that. Once we have a good concept of what the behavior is, then we jump into the toys and play.
Mm. Yeah. A few months ago, I was at the Mia Skalkster's seminar
He is amazing.
in Estonia, and I have
Yeah,
to say she's the best dog trainer I've ever seen use food.
she's
Like
amazing.
the way
Yeah.
she uses food is absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
When you're using food, are you using luring or more shaping?
I don't do too much
What's your
shaping. I don't do a ton of shaping. Now,
right?
when I say that, um, I'll add a little shaping in there when the dog's giving me the opportunities.
Mm.
You understand? But I'm not someone who likes to just sit there and let the dog figure things out completely. Maybe because I don't have that kind of patience. You know, there's one behavior that I do a lot of free shaping with, and that's the retrieve, the formal retrieve,
Mm.
the formal fetch. Because maybe, and maybe this is just me, but I've taught the force fetch, train retrieve, whatever you want to call it, many different ways, and I'm pretty good at teaching it. But once I switched the way to free shaping it, man, it was just so much faster, and the dogs just love the behavior. You know,
And you, sorry to interrupt, but you free shape that with food or play
yeah,
or it doesn't
food.
really.
Yeah,
Okay, so food
food in the
definitely.
beginning, food in the
Food in the beginning.
beginning, you know, and then like I
And
said, like
would that be
everything
even
else.
if the dog is fully motivated to play?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
do. Yeah, I start that with food because here's the other thing too, with some of the behaviors, and again, this is just the way I do things,
Mm.
right? Everyone's going to be different. Some of the behaviors, like for example, let's take my oldest dog, Luca, my oldest Malinois. Like when I was teaching him something complicated, or at least complicated to me, if I'm teaching him a reverse handstand, right? That's a fairly complicated trick, a lot harder than a sit or a down or a heel. If I were to use toys or play, or even his regular reward marker, yes, he wouldn't be able to function. He couldn't. So I changed everything for that behavior. And even though his food drive isn't anywhere near where his play drive is, I use food to have him in a calmer state. And I turn to a clicker just for that behavior because my reward marker elicits a lot of excitement. I want it to. And so when I would reward him in a complicated behavior like that, forget it. He would just lose it. And I remember I did a video years ago with him. He was young, and I had a little pickup truck, and it had a very tiny bumper, and I showed me teaching him how to balance on the bumper using food, which he got it very quickly. And then I said, okay, now watch what happens when I go and grab the ball. And I went and I got the ball. I tried the same exact thing, and he couldn't do it. He just kept falling off the bumper, right? His drive went too high to learn. And
what were you doing with the ball?
I just brought that was going to be his reward.
That was just going to be his reward. So the ball was in your pocket.
I can't remember. It was in my pocket, in my hand. You know,
Right,
I was probably trying to lure him up there, just like with the food.
Right.
But he couldn't function. That doesn't mean that all dogs will behave like that, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of these higher drive dogs that we see dog trainers work with, he couldn't function and do that if we were going to utilize play or a toy reward in learning that behavior. Now, once he had it, once he understood that behavior very quickly, now I could use the toy or the ball or play. And even if he struggled a little bit, I could wait it out till he gets it right and then reward, you know. But so for me, there's a lot of benefits in using food with many dogs.
Okay. What are some of the common areas that you see dog owners, dog trainers struggling with when they're playing with their dogs?
Oof, everything. Oh my God. Where do I start? For one, there's a lack of sincerity in people when they're working with their dogs, when they're disappointed in their dogs, when they're happy with their dogs. Like you mentioned Mia, right? So you saw, like, if you take someone like Ivan Balabanov, right? Everyone knows play is the biggest part of his training program. That's a massive, massive part of his training program. With Mia, her emotions, the emotions that she uses in training, that's a massive, massive part of what she does. You understand? Yeah. And so when you're dealing with a lot of dog trainers or dog owners, that is lacking 100%. There is no emotions there. There's fake emotions, and it comes across as so non-sincere. And you can see that the dogs don't fall for it, right? And that's something I try to push every day, but you can't teach someone that, right? It has to be in them. You could try to bring it out, but some people just don't have the capability of being sincere with their dog, you know? And some people will take everything you say and then really live by it like 100% and they don't have the capacity to think on their own and make changes. You understand? And so getting people to think on their own, just to give them the information and make it their own, it's very, very difficult. Very difficult. But in the pet dog world, we see people that struggle with behavioral problems, but they have no foundation. They have nothing in place with their dog. There's no communication system. There's no motivation. And they want to fix step 8, 9, and 10. And they don't have step 1 and 2 under their belt, you know? And some people just want the problem fixed. Well, it doesn't work like that. And the majority of the pet dog world, I think it's safe to say, their expectations from professional dog trainers is so far off at times. I'll give you an example. I hate doing a board and train for a dog that doesn't have behavioral problems. Hate it. I absolutely hate it. You would think, well, this is easy. Yeah, it is. It could be fun. Absolutely. I get some cool dogs just to train with, right? The problem is when and I'll use myself as example. So a lot of pet dog people see me. They see that I have a little bit of a following. People trust me. I'm honest. So they want me to train their dog that has no behavioral problems. So they'll want to do a board and train, even though I try to persuade people not to. Hey, you don't need that. I could save you a lot of money. Let's do private lessons. They just insist on it. But when a dog doesn't have behavioral problems, it's much harder to satisfy the client as opposed to if they did have behavioral problems. Because when a dog comes in with behavioral problems, we can almost always turn that around fairly quickly, right? And when you give the dog back and do a little work with the client, there's a visible change that they could see, a massive change, and that makes people happy. Oh my gosh, this was so worth it. When a dog doesn't have behavioral problems and they just want a higher level of obedience, they want their dog to look like mine. Even though I keep dogs a long time, your dog's not going to look like mine in a month's time. So when you give that dog back, they may be waiting to see a different dog. They don't understand it doesn't work like that, you know, because their expectations on what, or their understanding of what dog training actually is so far off. It's not even funny. They think these animals are robots, and you just teach them to do this, tell them to do that, and then you give the dog back and everything's fine. They don't understand that's not how it works. We could lay that foundation down. We could take the dog further than where it is now, but you're going to have to continue if you want truly a higher level of obedience. That doesn't happen in 2 or 3 weeks or a month. It takes a little bit of time, you know? So as far as that subject goes, like, we could talk forever just about that. You know, they give the dogs way too much freedom too soon and create all kinds of unnecessary behavioral problems. And of course, many people get a dog that they shouldn't have. Wrong breed, wrong energy level, wrong genetics for the wrong lifestyle. You know, you can't be someone that likes to hang on the couch all day and not do much and watch the Golden Girls and get yourself a high drive working dog. And it happens every day. You know, they just don't understand. They think if they take the dog in the yard and throw a ball for 30 minutes, which is great that people do that, that all is going to be good. And that's not always the case. You know, it just isn't.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Tether Tugs. I made a post a while ago where I stated that I don't use Tether Tugs.
You don't use what?
I don't use Tether Tugs.
Taylor Tugs?
Tether Tugs.
Oh, Tether Tugs.
There we go. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And you certainly expressed your disagreement with me on that post.
Oh, yeah. You know, I've done that a few times with you.
Yeah. And it's good. It's good. So it wasn't a very well written post. So
here's
I'll
the
quickly
why.
clarify my position on Tether Tugs first.
Yeah.
And then I want to hear what
Sure.
you think, and you can tell me how you incorporate them.
Yeah.
So I'll absolutely use a Tether Tug that has a mechanism like a snap shackle to release the toy when the dog gives some good effort to take the tug first before you so to take the tug. In fact, when I broke my leg, I used a tug attached to a strong resistance band, and I attached a snap shackle to it, attached to a string, and that was what kept my Malinois entertained.
Sure.
With this, there is a clear objective to the game, and I really do think it's a really cool piece of equipment. However, what I don't use is a Tether Tug that has no release mechanism, because there is really, at least to me, I don't see that there's any clear objective to this. And I always choose a game with an objective versus non-objective free-form play, if I can. Another reason why I wouldn't use this is because there really is no closure. Natural predatory and play sequences include a moment of closure, catching, carrying off the prey, etc. That moment calms the system and gives some psychological satisfaction. A fixed tether can remove that closure, so the dog never gets the calming, satisfying end of the sequence, the win. What's your thoughts, Larry?
Yeah, well, you have to have some kind of snap on it that the dog can remove the tug. That's a big part of it, right? So here's the
Right.
thing. So I do a lot of seminars with Jay Jack, right? And Jay is the creator of GRC, and Jay uses a lot of spring pole stuff in the
Yeah.
sport. Used a lot of spring pole stuff coming from the pit ball world, and that's where I took this idea for my elderly clients. So I have clients that are in their 70s and their 80s that get working line Shepherds, Malinois, Rottweilers all the time. So I have a lot of people that have very powerful, highly driven dogs that do not have the capability of playing tug with their dog. None. And then I'm training their dog and I'm starting them off playing one-on-one, but I can't be unfair to the dog and the humans. I can't train the dog the way I would train it to try to look good, try to make the dog look good with me, try to make myself look good, and then pass the dog off to them. And when it falls apart because they can't do the same things I do, blame them, the lazy owners that don't do their homework. That's what dog trainers do, right?
Yeah.
So, and a spring pole is the best option, but not everyone has the ability to build or hang a spring pole. It's a little more complicated, not very complicated, but the tether tug is something that no matter how small your yard is, you can utilize, right? But yes, my tether tugs do have a panic snap on them. Again, I took that from Jay. Yes, there can't just be an endless effort of the dog fighting with the tug with no objective and no opportunity to ever retain possession itself, right? So is it as good as playing tug with me or with the human who knows what they're doing? No, but it's massively beneficial for someone who's in their 70s or 80s and cannot physically do that with them.
Yeah,
absolutely. And so, yeah, of course. But the other thing is too, we're only thinking about the play and the objective of the play and the goals with the play. But also I use that for my clients for a much higher level of obedience to keep the dog challenged and into what they're doing instead of the same bullshit, walking in your backyard or your kitchen, asking the dog to sit and then giving a piece of kibble. Like people will do that forever, which is, it's crazy. But with the tether tug or a spring pole, either one, we get to take the obedience the dog knows. And I've always done this without the tether tug and spring poles. I've been showing that stuff for years. We take the obedience that the dog knows and we provide it in many different ways, many different pictures. We make it more challenging, more fulfilling for the dog. You could send the dog to the tug, get it, boom, he's playing, out, down, heel, get it, boom, boom, boom. You know what I mean? Heel, get it, down. Like you could do so many different things off of that. But again, people make assumptions. And then they get the tether tug, they put it in the ground, and they just watch their dog pull and try to get the tug for a couple of hours till it gets bored and walks away. And they're like, my dog wasn't into it. No, your dog would be into it if you presented it in a different way, right? So I think one of the biggest issues in all of dog training, and this is massive on the force-free side of things, right? They make assumptions. They assume that every so-called balanced trainer does this. They see the prong collar on the dog or they see the e-collar on the dog and the dog's doing obedience, basic stuff. And you'll get some idiot say, oh, I don't need an e-collar to teach that stuff. Because in their mind, that person taught all that stuff with an e-collar, right? The dog would get it wrong and they'd blast their ass. That's what people truly assume, right? And I know this because for years, I would have force-free people showing up to my seminars looking to disrupt things. And then by lunchtime or the end of the first day, they'd come up and be like, this isn't what I expected. Like, I came here to hate you. I'm like, what do you mean? And then they be honest and fess up what their purpose was there. And then they'd make the switch. Oh my God, I was so wrong, and it's because they imagine the worst all the time. But balanced trainers are just as guilty, right? You hear the people bagging on play and things like that, or using bite suits with human aggressive dogs. They think a certain thing is being done. And the truth is they're ignorant to how things are actually being utilized. They're just making the assumption because they don't know the full story or how things are being used, what is being done. They're making the assumption off of their knowledge, their skill level. And when they can't think a little further, they're always going to think that's stupid. You know, why would you put pressure on a dog and have them force them to bite you just so you could punish them? That's what they really think, when they have no clue what the hell they're talking about. They're still living off like learning theory that took place 100 years ago, like no bullshit. And it's absolutely insane. So when we do things like this, it's not things that I created or Jay created or any of the people I work with. It's people that we took. It's things that we took from the best of the best. And so when I hear people shitting on things, I just laugh, because it's like the people teaching this stuff are at a level that you will never be. That's what I want to say to them. Not even close. You will never be, you know? And so they should probably do a little more homework and at least learn what's going on. And then they could decide whether it's something that they would want to utilize or not. But they don't, because they build themselves up a reputation as someone who's very knowledgeable and skillful, and they never want to be outed as, I could still learn stuff. And the second you think you know everything, you're done. Like, you shouldn't be charging money. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So the one thing that I will give myself credit for, because I am very critical of myself. Like, if I see someone doing something that's good, I'm going to learn it. Like, I want to learn. I'm going to be a student, plain and simple. But that's why you could start watching my videos from 18 years ago to 18 hours ago. You're always going to see me changing and evolving for the better. That's because, like every other subject in the world, for the most part, dog training is getting better and better. And it's getting better on the dog while we're getting better results. So if you want to keep doing what you people were doing 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, you're going to be lost. That's all there is to it, you know?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more there. So yeah, with the Tether Tugs, I think we agree there that ideally there should be some release mechanism so that the dog can win. And it's like, to me, I think it really is a very suitable alternative to playing tug with your dog.
Sure. Well, see, you're guilty of a lot of the things I am also. And so often I will say things only thinking of the people that know me well, that understand what I'm saying. But I'm not always clear for a lot of people who don't know me that well. You understand? So I do leave it to their interpretation, and that always
it was a badly written post. I don't disagree with that. It was,
so I do the same. Yeah. I do the same thing very often, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's move on to differential reinforcement.
Mm-hmm.
Do you use it, and could you give an example of where you might choose to incorporate it into a training plan?
Man, I don't.
If you do use it,
I really don't. Really? You know, I have no beef with it, you know, and maybe I do here and there without even realizing it. But I'm really simple. I'm really basic, man. You know, by time I put the dog in a situation that it struggles with, you know, I'm going to have the ability to tell the dog, hey, dude, I don't like that. Don't do that. You know, I'm not asking for different behaviors or anything to try to avoid not saying I wouldn't if I had to, you know what I mean? But it's just not something that I focus on very much. I just don't. I don't. Redirection and all this stuff that people talk about. Have I done it before? Sure, of course. When it's the best option that you have to turn to, right? You're always going to try to utilize what you think is best at that moment. But I haven't done much like that in a very long time because I'm very simple. I'm very black and white. I'm going to keep the dog away from where the struggle is. I'm going to build what I need with that dog. right? He's going to understand what I like. He's going to understand what I don't. He's going to know what yes means. He's going to understand what no means. And most of all, he's going to trust me. He's going to trust me big time. So when I do put him in that situation, one of two things will almost always happen. Either that behavior is not there at all, or it's much less intense. And when I say, hey, dude, don't do that, he gets it. Oh, okay. It's like, just like we did in your yard, it applies all over. Yeah. So I don't spend a lot of time, using differential reinforcement in those situations.
Yeah. Well, for me, it is, there is a place for it, and I do see it as being very useful in certain scenarios. But I absolutely get what you're saying, and sometimes trainers, they'll really overcomplicate things to the point where it's just stupid, when all you have to really say is just tell the dog no.
Yeah, just don't do that.
Just say
Yeah.
no and follow up with some aversive consequence. It's not as complex as you're making it, but
no, it's really not.
I do think that there is a place for.
Sure, there's always exceptions to every rule.
Differential
You
reinforcement.
know what I mean? There's always exceptions to every rule, and if you got to do it, look, a good place to do that. I do a lot of seminars, right?
Yeah.
That is a very unfair and unrealistic place to train a dog for both the dog and the owner. It's just not realistic. Like when we put the dog in a room with 30, 40, 50 other really difficult dogs, right? If you have to use some kind of alternate behaviors or incompatible behaviors in a situation like that, that's a good time to do so.
Or even just any other behavior.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure. If we need to put you on a tug to walk you through the crowd to get to where you need to be to work, absolutely. Hey, not a problem. You know what I mean? I'm all for it. I'm not going to try to, oh no, we're going to stop them from doing. Yeah, totally. But again, that situation it's not a real world being at a seminar. It's very difficult. It's a very difficult position for the dog and the human. So in those instances, especially, yeah, like I have no issue with stuff like that.
Yeah, one example actually is the video that I have on Facebook, I believe it is, of the Malinois, the car chasing Malinois. That was a dog that had gone through some training previously, and he'd been through. They tried to make some direct association with cars using the electric collar, and it was unsuccessful. Whatever they did, the dog went towards the car, and they lit the dog up on the electric collar. And then they stopped, and if it goes near to the car, they light the dog up on the electric collar, and it really was not successful for them at all. And that was a dog where we did use punishment, and we used it in a slightly different way. But we also incorporated differential reinforcement using toys, and this is also a place where, although I don't like to, so I really do think there is a place for non-objective freeform play in certain situations. And with this dog, when I was using the differential reinforcement, we were using a toy, but the only reason why the dog was biting the toy was not to play some game with me that was based on the objective of I'm trying to gain possession of a toy.
Sure.
It was really just releasing all of its frustration into the toy. So yeah, there's definitely a place for non-objective play, if you can even really call it play. And that was one of the things we used with that dog, was a quite well-planned differential reinforcement program, along with punishment as well, for chasing the cars, and that worked really well.
Yeah, I totally could see why it would be utilized there for sure. Sometimes just in that same situation, sometimes just having a tug or a toy in the vicinity on the ground, allowing the dog to make that choice on its own instead of doing, in this case, the car thing, right? Can also be super effective, but it's putting that frustration somewhere else. Sure. 100%.
No, it got to a certain point where it very quickly got to a point where the owner would walk down the street, they'd have the tug just holding it in their hand. The dog sees a car. He's starting to feel that frustration, that want to chase the car, and then immediately he'd come back around and start going after the tug. So it was very cool. And then now there is no tug that's needed. So my next question was going to be on differential reinforcement, and it was play versus food. When would you choose to use play over food, and vice versa? But like you say, if you don't use it a lot, then we can certainly skip that question.
Sure. Well, I used to do something similar, right? I think the first time I showed it to a lot of people, I was doing a seminar in Australia, and there was a very difficult working line shepherd there that really struggled around dogs. He was just, he wanted to fight. And there was a pit bull also, same problem. So these two in the same room, it was a lot, you know what I mean? And I remember what I had people do is I had conditioned both dogs to a clicker as quick as I could, right? And they started catching on really quick. I don't use a ton of clickers, but in these examples, I do like to use clickers. And so I would condition both dogs to the clicker. And then once another dog would come in the room, as soon as you would see that dog stressing, I would click and feed. I was using food in here, you know? And at first, people got a little upset with me. They really did. They said, no, we're trying to stop this, and now you're rewarding this. And I said, look, just give me 10 minutes. If you don't see a change, we'll stop, you know? And what they started seeing was, yes, every time the dog looked, I didn't wait till he blew up and then tried to click him out of it. As soon as you saw the stress come, boom, I'd click, feed, 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 feed. And we repeated that till eventually what would happen was then when a dog would walk in, that dog would feel his stress rising, and it became reflexive where now they start looking where, hey, when's it coming? You know, and people are like, that doesn't make any sense. Well, it doesn't make sense to us maybe, but it makes sense to the dog. Just watch the dog. He'll tell you if it's worth doing or not. You understand? And if you see it's having an impact, why would you shit on it? Run with it, utilize it. You know, I never tried to do just one thing to stop a behavior or teach a behavior. In my opinion, the more pictures you can show a dog on either side, stopping or teaching, I think the learning is going to be better. But that's just me. That's the way I see things.
Yeah, that's very good. So our next question is, do you think there's a place for backwards or simultaneous conditioning?
Simultaneous conditioning? No, not a big fan. Not a big fan. Backward conditioning? Absolutely. 100%. And many, many people do, you know. Listen, when somebody wants to utilize the e-collar, okay, I give them the option. How do you want to do it? I don't care. You want to do it the way I used to do it? You want to do it the way I do it now? Not a problem. Here's the issue. When it comes to the e-collar, and this is all my opinion, right? I didn't invent anything or come up with anything new. I just took what people far superior to me than we're doing, and I dumbed it down and packaged it for the everyday dog owner. Okay? When we're talking negative reinforcement, basic escape avoidance training, our job is to teach the dog how to escape whatever aversive we're using, right? Whatever kind of pressure we're using, our job's to teach the dog the way out. I want to teach the dog the way out every way possible, okay? We have such an advantage when it comes to the e-collar because every dog, no matter breed, temperament, it doesn't matter, size, every dog in the beginning has that same reaction when they first feel it. Even super low level stimulation, they all have the same reaction. What is that? totally foreign to them. Okay. So in that moment of confusion, when the dog doesn't know what it is, and we give them the way out, to me, that's very powerful. It's a very powerful learning moment. But also, I can go on and give examples for hours with this. I want to be able to get enough repetitions to make sure the dog is educated. When you're only using it as an aversive, which, by the way, that's what people tried since the late 1950s to currently and destroyed millions of dogs. Okay. When I talk about this, or when me and Ivan did the podcast, it had nothing or it had very little to do with the dogs on my end. And that's why I didn't disagree with anything that was brought up in that podcast. I didn't disagree with it. But dog trainers tend to see things from the side of the dog trainer or even a good dog, right? When you're talking about someone that doesn't have the ability to deliver a piece of food properly to a dog, which is the majority of the pet dog world. And now all of a sudden you're going to put a remote for electric in their hands and expect them to use it only as an aversive when necessary. The majority of people are going to fail. And I still see them failing as they try that now. But when you utilize a little backward conditioning for a very short period of time, very short period, right? Couple of sessions, and then start utilizing it both ways, it's not just the amount of people I've worked with directly, but the amount of people that I've had contact with over the years because of this. Hundreds of thousands of people, maybe not hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands of people, like literally. It has changed people's ability to be effective with the tool. Okay. And if
what do you mean by that? So
it forces people to develop a little bit of handling skills while running less of a risk of destroying the dog. Safer. They're going to fuck up the training. There's no doubt about it. And I tell people that you're going to screw this up this week, right? But if you do it carefully and you present it in a way to the dog that makes sense, you're not going to screw up the dog. When people try to utilize the e-collar through only forward conditioning, only as an aversive, they're going to make a lot of mistakes and the dog pays the price. This isn't an opinion. Like for many years, 70-something% of the people I work with, their dogs were destroyed by e-collars. You take out the e-collar, they're shaking, they're hiding. And people still want to deny that that's a thing. Or I'll get private messages saying, you shouldn't say that. It feeds into the force-free agenda. Well, the only thing I care about is the truth. I care about the truth. And I've shown these dogs. I've literally shown it, right? But I also shown the difference when I start from the beginning, the way I do things, not a way I created. This is the way that some of the best in the world still do it. Now, you don't have to do it that way. You could have success either way, right? I just had a Bernedoodle here, right, for board and train. By the time I took this dog out in public to a park or something on a 50-foot line, trying to recall her away from things, I couldn't get her to blow me off without the e-collar. I couldn't do it. Like, she just is a great dog and will respond like lightning to everything. If I don't utilize some backward conditioning in the beginning, I rarely get to introduce that collar to her. And then the first time I need to utilize it, it's a crapshoot. Is she going to get it? Is it going to be effective?
Why, if you're using forward conditioning, why do you rarely get to introduce it to the dog?
Well, if the dog never gives you hesitation or blows you off, where are you using it? Where are you getting some repetitions in?
Yeah, but what? So I suppose we've definitely got to talk about this, about the electric collar. As you know, I really don't agree with low-level stim conditioning, but I also think that,
well, that's the new trend. That's the new fad, right? That's what's cool.
It's not the.
Oh yeah, no, it's new. It's new, right? I pay attention to everything, right? Let me tell you something. You take a dog that is scared to step out the front door, can't do anything, right? Like really just a shell of an animal. The boogeyman's always there. And you decide you're going to utilize an e-collar and get this dog off leash running, and you try just to use that tool as an aversive, even as a mild aversive, there's going to be a lot of problems there.
Yeah, but as a good dog trainer, you wouldn't necessarily be thinking to use the electric collar right there when you've got this dog that's really
now
fearful.
you just proved my point. What I said earlier. You're seeing this from a good dog trainer standpoint, when the majority of the people that are going to put that tool on a dog have no dog training skills whatsoever.
I completely agree with that.
Right?
I completely
and that's
agree.
the difference. And that's why during that podcast, I never disagreed with anything Ivan said. I agreed with everything. But you're not looking at anything I do, William. Most things that I do, it's coming from the perspective of someone that doesn't know what the fuck they're doing.
I absolutely agree.
And if you truly want to help, listen, there's people out there that like me very much. I get it. I've made a decent name for myself, but there's people also that hate my guts because I don't sugarcoat shit. I'm very honest. I'm very, very honest. Okay. I've had people, old timers, legends in the game, reach out and say things to me. You're right. This is what we were trying to do from the beginning, and we failed. Don't change the way you're doing things because and this isn't my doing, right? But I think when we started doing things in a more modern way, where we started adding the conditioning, where the technology got much better on the tools, that's where we saw more people going, including myself, who used to hate the tool because I grew up in the bird dog world, right? Bird hunting, watching what these dogs were doing out when we're in the woods hunting pheasant. I'm watching the dogs scream and holler and run faster away in the direction they're not supposed to be going. So I hated the tool. But then in like the early 2000s, I started seeing e-collars being used, and there were people out there starting to really make a name for themselves. And I watched the dogs and I go, man, this isn't how I remember. So I got involved with that. And my first introduction was constant simultaneous stimulation, right? Simultaneous conditioning, pressure, pressure, pressure. Every time you give a command, you're using the e-collar at the same time. Well, I was smart enough right from the start going, this doesn't make any sense. This doesn't make any sense. Dog never has an opportunity to win or better itself. I don't like this. But then I found better people, right? Because then I started using only forward conditioning and had a lot of success with it. A lot of success. But sometimes the dogs would be a little iffy and look a little more down in the dumps. And then they would tell me, give them 3 days, it'll be fine. Okay. And they were usually right. After 3 days, the dog would be fine. But once I went and worked with some of the best, and they were doing both ways for a short period of time in the beginning, forward conditioning and backward conditioning, I never saw that again in a dog. Never saw that down low. I just watched a video today, very well-known trainer, very respected trainer, and that dog, how anyone would post this and be proud of it, I don't get it, because you could tell what this dog looks like. It looks like it's miserable. And I could tell you why. There's a lot of simultaneous conditioning there, or way too much backward conditioning. See, that's a problem also. Or when the backward conditioning becomes too aversive for the dog. Big problem. But that's not what I'm talking about. But again, people make a lot of assumptions. I'm going to assume
you use the working level with the backwards conditioning, so that's the lowest level that the dog can feel.
Yes, in the beginning, right? But then people will try to get their dog off leash and stop a behavior or recall the dog off of things, and they're still using these low levels. assuming.
and that's why you've got the intermittent phase and the
But that's people assuming that that's what we do. I do, other people do, and it's not. It's wrong. As a matter of fact, after that first or second day, I'm never ever utilizing any backward conditioning again. I'm never utilizing the e-collar before a command ever. Right? It's literally for a super short moment. That video I put out on Sit, Stay, Learn, that was super unfair to the dog, right? Because I took a dog that I didn't have a relationship with. It had no food drive, had no play drive. I did that on purpose. I wanted a realistic dog that the majority of the country deal with, right? And that whole shoot, now you got to remember, we're in a strange place. There's a video crew, there's a camera, there's lights, and this dog has to trust me, right? So over 3 days, we did 6 sessions. 2 the first day, 2 short sessions the first day, 2 short sessions the second day, and the third day, the final session, we take this dog to a brand new place, brand new park, let it off leash, drop the line for the first time, and you watch this dog fly around like a lunatic, as happy as could be. Now, when I call that dog, it hits the brakes and comes flying back to me, and it's a beautiful thing. But then someone there said something that was kind of funny. They go, yeah, but you didn't use the e-collar. I said, yeah, that's the purpose. That's the point. That's my whole goal, to get to that point very, very quick. So even though that wasn't an ideal situation to train in, I don't understand why anyone would ever stop doing that. And like I said, it's why some of the best on the planet still do it. Some of the best on the planet don't do it, and that's okay. But again, when you start thinking of it only from the dog trainer's perspective, that's selfish, because I care more about where's the biggest number of dogs that have shitty lives or struggle or never get to be off leash or wind up in the shelters. It's with the general public. So what can the general public do the best? Well, I could tell you, after all these years of dealing with people one-on-one, that's the easiest way for them to succeed. The way that makes sense to the dog quickest, where the owner's not going to just blow the dog's head off. So I'm speaking from experience, and that's why so many people still do it. Okay? I'll never change doing that. Never.
Yeah. So,
now, some people, didn't mean to cut you off, will be stagnant and stay in that so-called conditioning phase and working levels for weeks and months at a time. Yeah, that's insane and unnecessary, you know, and I'm probably part of the blame there, because I've always been so conservative with it, because again, I'm concerned about the dog and the person who can't deliver a piece of food properly using a remote collar. Now people are going to say, well, then they shouldn't use a collar. I agree, but they're going to. You understand? They're going to. It doesn't matter. People are going to use that tool. So at least give them a way that when they do mess it up, they're not going to mess up the dog. And I think I've done a halfway decent job of proving that a lot of people could be successful that way.
Yeah, I agree, and it's definitely a much better approach than what was being done when the electric collars first came out. You know,
Lord,
it's a massively improved approach, and I think when the average dog owner or even dog trainer actually listens to a dog trainer tell them, I don't use low-level stim conditioning, we've definitely got to think about what is it that they're going to use. And, you know, I could list all of the disadvantages that I see and problems with low-level stim conditioning, but then what are they going to do? They're going to go out not even understanding the basics of learning theory, the basics of classical operant conditioning, anything of how dogs learn. They're going to go out there, or at least maybe they're going to think that they understand, but really they haven't got as deep an understanding as they need. They're going to go out there, they're going to put the collar on the dog, they're going to let the dog out into some field, and they're going to light the dog up.
No, like
And the
people
dog's going
truly,
to,
people
yeah,
truly believe to this
yeah,
day that if they just put that collar on the dog and press the buttons, tell it what to do, it's
yeah,
going to
yeah,
do it.
exactly.
Like
And
they,
that's the problem with trainers that come out and
sure.
they say, I don't use low level stim conditioning. Okay, so what exactly do you do? And there's a lot to it, and it's a podcast. It's definitely not the place to start detailing
Well, and
exactly how I would use the electric collar.
here's the other problem, William. When I have a dog here, let's say I have a dog here for a month, the e-collar stuff may be 5% at most part of the training. It's not
absolutely.
it's like it doesn't even go on usually for a while, maybe towards the end of training where we're going to utilize it. And it's such a small, insignificant part of training, right? And for me, I use it for one reason: to have something there for that dog to be able to run free off leash. That's it. I'm not using it in obedience. If you got some annoying things you want to stop, sure, I'm not against that, right? But the majority of people out there still want to utilize it forever. Listen, for me, and maybe this is wrong, it's going to piss people off, but when I see someone walking around trying to show off what they're doing, but that remote is in their hand, it's a total turnoff to me.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Because to me, like you're not accomplishing what you think
or even if the collar is even on the dog.
It's
just not impressive. There's nothing impressive about that.
No, and so I've always tried to make the majority of my videos, if you ever notice, even with my dogs in public, there's no collars on my dog for a reason. Because for a long time, I think people forget too, I've been putting stuff out for a really long time. For a long time, I was that e-collar guy, and they assumed my dogs were doing the things they did because of e-collars, even when at times they had never been introduced to a collar yet. But again, it goes back to people making assumptions that just aren't true. So I used to bust my ass to try to show as much as I could without any tools. But you know what? It didn't matter. And I don't try to convince anyone of anything anymore. I don't care. I don't care what this guy's doing or what this woman's doing. I don't care. I try, when I see someone being unkind to an animal, yeah, I have a really bad response to that. But other than that, I try not to get involved. Listen, I'm getting emails now. There's a dog trainer that's selling people's dogs, taking them in for a board and train and selling them to, I guess, fulfill his drug habit. And they want me to be part of that. Help me get my dog. I can't do that shit anymore. I got my own things to worry about, and I can't be the dog training police. Yes, there are times where I can't help but to share something when you see someone horrifically abusing a dog. But that shit takes its toll on you. It wears your ass down. People don't understand like how that affects you the rest of the day, But yeah, you're one person, but guess what? 10 more people sent me something similar. Am I going to spend full time just going after abusers? Because you know what happens? When I first post something like that, everybody jumps on it. Everyone's together. But then it dies out and no one gives a shit. And nothing happens to these people anyway. And it's exhausting and it puts a lot of stress on me. I don't want nothing to do with it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's definitely a smart approach. Let's see. So, yeah, another thing I'd like to say actually about the electric collar is, just because someone says that they don't use low-level stim conditioning doesn't mean that you have to switch. You have to believe that they're using the exact opposite of that. They're using high-level stim conditioning. We're just turning the remote to whatever the maximum is and letting the dog out and blasting it. That's absolutely not what anyone's saying. But yeah, it's good for people to experiment with things, but you have to experiment with the things that are safe, that are not going to ruin your dog.
Think of it this way. You could take two of the best trainers on the planet, right? Two well-known trainers. And I'm thinking of two in particular, but I won't say their names. They do things completely opposite. Completely opposite. One doesn't agree with one on this subject and vice versa. But yet they get to the same damn place. right? And everyone loves both of them. But when it comes to the e-collar stuff, they're going to take sides. It just brings out the crazy in people. You know what I mean? And I think we give it too much attention. We really do. I think it's just, to me, it's just another tool, and nowhere as near as important as the leashes. And if you could master a leash, you could have a really good off-leash dog if you do all the other things properly. You know, I didn't use e-collars. I didn't use food. I didn't use prong collars for a really long time. And my dogs were just as good then as they are now, you know, and that's because I put my effort into the right places. I don't rely on a tool ever for anything.
Absolutely. You know, if you've got two very good dog trainers, they understand learning theory to a good extent. What further benefits do you think there would be of using low-level stim conditioning versus not using it?
With two people, equal skills, I think it depends more on the dog.
Right.
You know, and again, we always assume we got a good dog or a dog without problems, right? When you're trying to teach a dog, let's say, leash pressure, no one bats an eye or disputes or fights against using leash pressure, starting off nice and easy and light, teaching the dog how to remove it. But when it comes to the e-collar, all of a sudden that's a problem, right? We don't put a leash on a dog and then say place, bam, right? Little light pressure, place, dog gets on. No one has a problem with that. But when it comes to the electric, it's a whole different story. To me, it's all the same.
So, you know, just because you don't use low-level stim conditioning doesn't mean we're using really high levels. But in your book, for the conditioning phase of your training, you're using a level that the dog can just barely feel, right?
Sure.
And that's not good. That's not bad. That's as close to neutral as you can get.
100%.
That's really where the difference is, and with the lead, it's different. If you're using the lead, you might be using light levels of pressure, but you're still negatively reinforcing something or punishing something. So that's definitely different to using low-level stim conditioning in the conditioning phase, where it's at that very lowest level where the dog can just barely feel it.
I think what people don't want to realize is it's really simple. Okay. Whatever you do doesn't matter. Just show the dogs, not just my own dogs, good dogs, right? But show your clients' dogs. If you're happy with the results, then do what you're doing. That's all that matters. Are you being fair to the animal? Does your animal is it full of life? Or is, when you call it to you, is the head dropping and it's dreading, or do you see the attitude down, right? If that's a problem, then you're doing something wrong. Now, there's no doubt in my mind you can get there in the best place doing both ways. I've done both ways. I could do both. No problem. That's why I offer people that. But the other thing is, a lot of people are not comfortable without the low-level conditioning. They're just not comfortable. They prefer it. It makes them feel a little more secure. It makes them, and this is something that, you know, it's why I give them options. I really do. But very few people bypass that part. But again, now what people think is you spend time doing that and then you jump into being off leash and, you know, put the dog in a bad situation. Now you're going to need higher levels to call them off something. It's not true. You know, I'm going very quickly after day 1 or 2. Now we're going for a walk on a long line, and I'm going to give the dog opportunities to blow me off. You know, I might recall him 3 times on a 30-40 minute walk, you know, maybe when his nose is in the ground, right? I'm not using low level before the command conditioning or whatever you want to call it at this point, I'm going to call the dog and give him an opportunity. And when he hesitates or doesn't respond, it's not going to be the lowest level perceived. It's going to be appropriate for that situation. You understand? So now the dog experienced it from both ways, knows how to escape it very, very well from both ends, but he also knows how to avoid it, right? And that's very important to me. So I've literally never had a dog ever in my life, or I can't think of a client either, that when we took the dog out to, and I'm sure there are because people make mistakes, but when I took the dog to a public place, as a dog just blown me off, or if I had to use the e-collar, it'd be one time usually. And I can't even remember having to do that more than once. There may be, I've worked with a lot of dogs, a lot of people, but it's just black and white to me. Does the dog understand how to turn things off, how to escape things? Have you given him an opportunity to avoid it, right? But now where a lot of people who use the low level stuff screw up is they try to utilize low levels for real world stuff. That's going to be a problem, right? It's going to be a problem. They do get hung up on the low level stuff. That will fail. You're going to run into problems for sure. But you have to have someone to guide you through the proper way all the way through, not just in the beginning.
Okay. Well, we've got a few more questions definitely to go over, and I don't want to make this podcast all about the electric collar. It's ultimately it's a small point to talk about. It's not that big of a deal. But yeah, what I would say is those that are seeing different trainers that are not using low-level stim conditioning, whether you're a dog owner or a beginner dog trainer, definitely don't just go out there, strap the electric collar on your dog and start doing things.
Sure.
It's probably not going to work out well, and
No.
you may turn up with some really big problems that occur from that. But if anyone is interested in how I use the electric collar, then I'm writing a book on the electric collar, and I don't use low-level stim conditioning, and I do go into a lot of detail. But I have to say that a good portion of that book is actually not at all about the electric collar. So it's going to be an interesting thing. All right. So next question is direct aversive associations with the thing that a dog is interacting with in an undesirable way versus an aversive that is personally associated with you.
What do you mean?
What are your thoughts? So if we have an aversive, so a direct aversive association is
Gotcha.
okay. The dog's chasing after a car, and the dog thinks, hey, the electric collar, in this example, we use the electric collar but it could be a few different things, and the dog makes the association, the car's done something bad. They've this is coming from the car versus this is coming from my human, and my human doesn't like me doing this.
Yeah, it depends on the situation, right? Like there's easy things that you could put in that category. People always use the same ones: counter surfing, digging holes in your yard, eating your bushes. Obviously those are things we don't want associated with us, right? We want something to come out of nowhere and create a little suspicious behavior from the dog in that scenario. Again,
well, it's not even suspicious. It's just they're making the right association. And
sure.
And
I tell people I'm not a big fan of underground fences, but they work for most dogs, right? And so how is that dog trained? You have a visual setup, flags border the property, right? As they get close to the flags, you'll hear the beep. If they take one step forward, their head gets blasted off. There's no low-level conditioning. There's no preparation.
I'm not a fan of them of underground fences at all.
It is violent, right?
Yeah.
But what I try to tell people is you'll never see a dog walking around a backyard with an underground fence that's scared. There's no confusion there. They're not scared because they know exactly why it happened and how to avoid it. You understand? If I take a dog to the dog park, outside of the dog park, which I do a lot with my clients, there's a nice big park right next to our dog park, so I'll do a lot of training there. A lot of times when I take them there for the first time, they're on a 50-foot line or a 100-foot line, and I'll use there's a Rottweiler that stays with me a lot. Her name is Rhodey. And so this was on video, so that's why I'll use this example. When I took her there, I'm just letting her run free like a dog, be a dog. And every now and then I'm recalling her to me, which she's turning, coming to me nicely. But then at one moment, she was like, that dog I want. I'm making a break for it, right? And she did. She took off for that dog. Now I have a few different options there. I could say nothing and hit her with a high level aversive and let her action create that. I could mark it with a no and then follow up with a high level aversive. She knows her marker words very well. She's going to respond to that. I chose a different option. I gave her an opportunity. I recalled her. And when she hesitated, I followed up with a higher level aversive for not coming to me. I don't know if there's a wrong or right in that scenario. Preferably, I'd love to utilize all three of those options at some point, but best case scenario, she never gives me that option again, which she never did. You understand? I think any one of those three options that I was...
a dog aggressive German Shepherd there that a trainer was struggling with, and she's a really good... She's got her heart in the right place. She's a good dog trainer. And how we dealt with the dog aggression was exactly that. We didn't use any punishment. We didn't create any direct association. We just used the recall. We just said, right, the dog starts the dog starts displaying some aggressive behavior, and you recall him back.
Sure.
And by the end of that, he was absolutely fine with other dogs. So
yeah, but you know what? Something that's not talked about, or at least I don't hear much of it too, William. In those situations, that's a very powerful exercise that I use on purpose with a lot of dogs. Right? Giving them that freedom, 50-foot line, 100-foot line, letting them be in the vicinity of what they struggle with, dogs, and working on those recalls in that situation. It's a very, very effective option to use in these situations. Yeah. So again, back the three different options I thought of, I chose the last one, the recall, right? I want to give the dog the opportunity. And if you could recall the dog away in that situation, you could recall him away from anything. Right? Yeah. Would I ever have to utilize the e-collar again in that situation with that dog? Most likely not,
But it's definitely a very good option. We don't always have to jump to using punishment or creating a direct association. We can actually just rely on the obedience that we've taught the dog. If that's really solid, then we can definitely use that. And
sure,
it's a very, very good option.
For sure.
Let's see. So with this next question, you really don't need to go into the step-by-steps of how you deal with this, as this podcast is definitely not an instructional video for those who are watching. What's your general approach, if you have one, to dealing with predatory chasing behaviors?
Oh, geez. It's not even a thing to me. Like, it's so easy to deal with that. It's kind of what I just explained. There's no difference. You understand? I don't do anything different. Let me say this better. Whatever problem someone comes to me with a dog, I don't address that problem head on, especially in the beginning, right? I do everything else I would normally do. I train the same way unless I don't have. That doesn't mean the same thing for every dog, right? But my goals with every dog are the same. How could I get this dog to trust me, to feel good about being with me? How could I make this dog feel good about itself, right? To feel the best it can, to bring the best out of it. continue to do what I do, laying a solid foundation, building things through play, setting rules and boundaries before I ever put that dog in the situation. Because then when I bring that dog out to a place where I know the dog's going to be tempted to go, then I can address it in the appropriate way. But I just don't find that stuff ever to be difficult. But I do think people struggle or fail because they go right at the problem. Okay. And I just think that's the wrong way to handle things. I don't know. Do you understand what I'm saying? Does that make sense? Like I hear you guys talk about it more in the UK than we do here. And I don't know if it's just a bigger problem over there. But as far as dealing with that one behavior, the predatory thing, it's never been very difficult to do. Now, if someone said, well, you can't use an e-collar, can it be done? Yeah, but it's going to be a lot harder and a lot riskier and take more time. But if you're utilizing the appropriate tools for something like that, holy crap, like that's just not difficult,
Oh, electric collars are still legal here, luckily. So,
yeah.
So that's definitely the best approach.
Yeah, and listen, in places where they're not legal and you can't use them, well, if you have to know your dog. If you don't have your ability to call your dog off the biggest temptation, then you don't deserve to have your dog off leash in situations like that where you're putting other beings, in danger. Like there has to be some common sense there, Like I deal with people all the time where someone will come into their house, a guest, a friend, family, and the dog bites them. But they refuse to put the dog up when people come home. Well, that's your fault. That's an easy fix. I'd have no problem putting my dogs up.
But recall alone is not like we can get a really, really strong recall, and
sure,
that's not that hard to achieve. That's very, very easy to.
No, it's not. But then you have to, if you put the dog in that situation with some kind of safety net attached, right, there has to be some kind of long line or something. Because if you make a mistake or the dog blows you up, then an animal suffers, and we can't have that, right? So I think in that situation, it's not something I have to deal with. Thank God.
And not only that, with the long line is definitely a good precaution to take, because
sure. And then if you
not only even if the dog doesn't get to the animal, say it's a very fast animal and the dog doesn't get to it, even if they don't get to the animal, you're still, there's a timeout on the electric collar, and if you've done things in a certain way and the dog's chasing after the animal, they're feeling the electric, and at a certain point that turns off and they're still chasing after the animal, now you've certainly caused some created some big problems for yourself.
Let's make it a hypothetical. Let's make believe here, right? Let's say all of a sudden we can no longer use e-collars in the United States. And this is a total fantasy thing, right? And I have a farmer that has a dog that will chase his livestock. And we have to fix that. It's a matter of life and death. He's going to kill the dog, right? Can we be effective without the e-collar? No, not in that kind of time frame anyway. But what I would do in that scenario, we're going to put the dog on a long line, put him in that situation because we have to, right? He's saying we have to do this or the dog's got to go. The dog makes the wrong move. First thing we're going to do, we're not stopping the dog with an e-collar. Now we don't have one. I'm stopping him with the long line attached to a prong collar. And then I'm going to create a punishment event that is extremely dramatic and long lasting, going to make a really big issue about it, right? Is that going to be guaranteed to work when no one's there? I don't know, but you're going to have a better chance. It's like maybe very different, but if I'm going to use a completely different example, if I'm training with someone who has service dog needs, right? Let's say the last dog I did that's in a kind of service type of environment spends its day at a school with children all day long. And one of the biggest fears is that one of the children leave the door open and the dog runs out the door and they're on a very busy street. It could be catastrophic, right? So one of the first things I teach that dog is it's not allowed to go through the doors until it hears the marker, the cue that I'm going to give for the dog to go through the door, which is through, right? So every time I say through, the dog's allowed to go. It's not allowed to pass through a door unless it hears the command to go through a door. This has nothing to do with thresholds or I'm the pack leader or I must go first. None of that bullshit. This is literally teaching the dog the permission to go through a doorway that leads outside is through. If a kid leaves the door open and there's a cat walking down the street, is that guaranteed to work to stop the dog from going through? No. But it may buy just enough time if the dog thinks about it. I didn't hear that, and fails anyway, but it may buy you just enough time to prevent the disaster. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
Can we train the predatory thing without an e-collar? Listen, we could do our best and we can be effective, right? Is it guaranteed when you're not there? It may work, it may not. But is the e-collar stuff guaranteed also? You got a better chance, but nothing's guaranteed when the human isn't around, But that's, again, just my opinion, my take on that.
Okay. So I'm going to give a little bit of a scenario here of a metaphorical dog that has a problem with chasing cats, and this is definitely an interesting one. And I've actually asked this to a few different dog trainers just to see what's their answer when punishment is failing. The dog chases cats, and the punishment is working to the point that it stops the behavior, but there's some level of temporary suppression. You're also, in this example, at the limits of what you're ethically comfortable with in terms of the intensity of the punishment and duration. However, as I said, any suppression that you're seeing is temporary. The behavior that you're punishing is still relatively high maintenance in that you have to keep punishing the behavior only for it to come back later on. I don't know if you've seen scenarios like this. I'd imagine you probably have. But I'd be curious to know what your thoughts are on this scenario and what might be going wrong and some things you might try.
Oh, geez, that's really hard to answer. Like I know it's. I mean, obviously, we run into situations like that fairly often, right? And the only thing I could say is this: if you do something 2 or 3 times and it fails, then you have to do something different, right? You have to change it up. Don't always know what that means until we try different things, and sometimes it takes multiple things that just aren't successful until we find the right thing. In that situation, we're kind of limited. There's not so many things we can do. But why are we being ineffective, right? Are we not making it worth the dog avoiding that situation? Are we going too easy? Are we being too quick? Are we letting the dog off the hook too fast? I don't know. It's not something I can give. I'm sure there's people out there that can give you a very honest, exact answer. I can't, because I go by what I see at that moment with that dog, like very instinctful. You understand what I'm saying? But in that situation, you have a dog with cats. I don't know. I don't know what I would do different, because it's too hypothetical. You understand? Obviously, if it's not working, then the dog's not seeing what we're doing as being punishing. It's not aversive enough, right? Are we creating a situation that falls under negative reinforcement? Are we allowing the dog to get out of that situation by offering something that maybe we don't even realize we're doing? Because a lot of people do that, right? I don't know. I've had situations before with very difficult dogs where nothing aversive meant anything to the dog. It didn't matter what you used on the dog. There was nothing aversive to this dog until maybe completely removing the owner out of the picture was the only thing the dog found punishing. Only thing it found aversive. That worked. But we failed the first 4, 5, 6 things we tried. So when you get in a situation like that, you have to find what is particular for that dog. And so I couldn't give you an honest answer there. I just people are going to do the typical things. They're going to set the dog up with a nanny cam or something and then blast its head off when it, encounters the cat with the e-collar. But if it's not working, what do you do from there? You understand?
So with this example, I used punishment just to confirm. So you take the view, I'm guessing, that punishment should be inescapable.
100%.
Right.
100%. And that's where most dog trainers fail, right? They don't even come close to punishing behaviors. And so, to be honest with you, there's been very few dogs, like I can't think of any, and I'm talking about some really difficult dogs, when we present punishment in a way that makes sense to the dog. You just don't deal with those behavioral problems for very long. It's very rarely that difficult to eliminate things. But what most people do, the aversive just gets harder. They turn to more force, but the concept in the dog's mind is still the same. You're still allowing the dog the option to get out of it, right? And then you get more frustrated, you get more angry, you yell a little louder, you correct a little harder, thinking that you're punishing the dog because you're going by the definitions of operant conditioning, right? You think if you're adding something aversive that the dog finds unpleasant, that's all it takes to stop a behavior. Well, guess what? If that was the case, no one would need a dog trainer. They'd be able to solve all their own problems. There's a reason why it doesn't work. Okay, so it's hard for me to imagine that. I'm not the best dog trainer in the world, but once you truly understand punishment, I mean, truly understand it, eliminating unwanted behaviors becomes so easy in most cases. There's rules to every there's exceptions to every rule, right? But in most cases, when you truly I made a post yesterday, and I don't do this that often, but I get a lot of really amazing messages from clients or people that I've never met, right? And I had someone who has taken a lot of psychology in college. We had one session last week. Our dog, typical issues, reactive on the leash. And once I started working with the dog, I said, oh, geez, this is going to be so easy. Like, you don't have to worry about this. It took 2 repetitions creating a minor punishment event with this dog. And I mean minor. And then she sent me that text, like, we went for a walk, saw 5 or 6 dogs. 2 of those dogs she's always lunged at and blew up at, and there was nothing. And she said, I can't believe I waited so long to reach out and get this done. That's because that dog, by other trainers, was punished, so-called punished, the same way. Just add more force and we'll stop this behavior. Well, that's rarely going to work, right? But once we presented punishment in a way that makes sense to the dog, and you don't have the option to dictate when you get out of it, that dog was like, oh, okay, why didn't you tell me this a while ago? So that's why it's very hard for me to answer that, because it's not something I run into often, because I do understand how punishment works. Most people don't, and they get pissed. And when they see you doing something different, they think it's stupid. Makes no sense to the dog. No, you're stupid. It makes no sense to you. But you'll watch the dog turn around very quickly, because now we're providing them something that makes all the sense in the world. And it has nothing to do with force or being an asshole. That's the big difference.
Well, there's definitely times where, and I'm sure must have seen this, where punishment's definitely not everything. Like, even if you're good at applying punishment, whatever that means to you,
Sure.
Whatever viewpoint you have on what you think punishment should be, even if you're really good at that, there's definitely a lot more to dog training before you even get to the punishment point, and I'm sure you absolutely agree with that. And
Well,
yeah,
yes, that's a great point, William, because I don't use a lot of punishment in dog training, right? Because I don't put the dogs in unfair situations until they're ready for it also, right? And the problem is, and I've seen this, Jay has seen this, believe me, we talk about it often at our seminars. We hate diving so much into punishment. We hate it. And the problem is, once people start to understand it and they see the effects of it, that's all they want to do. They want to punish everything, and that's a problem. That's a problem. Even though we tell people, listen, we're going to move faster than we normally would because you're here, you're at a seminar. This is unrealistic. But when you go back home, like, you've got to go back and do the right thing from the start. Don't just start trying to punish things, There's something that I teach people at seminars, usually if the opportunity arises, and I have to explain to them over and over, please understand, I've never done this on my own. Like, I don't have to do this with dogs. This setup, I don't do it because I don't have to. But you're here, it's unfair. We're going to teach you this stuff, but your job is to take the information and utilize it to do the right thing when you go home on the right time frame, not just throwing the dog in these situations and punishing. And I know we could repeat this stuff over and over. People don't care. They're going to see the new shiny toy and be like, whoa, and they're going to just take advantage of it for sure.
Yeah, that was exactly the same. When I went to Estonia, I was only there for 5 days. 3 days of that was mainly doing the seminar, and we had to do things that I wouldn't normally do in order to rush that dog along, and that's sometimes what you've got to do, but you've also got to be very clear about what else that is needed in order to continue to have success.
You got some young trainers out there now doing really great things, right? And people are all over them. They're really paying attention to their stuff, and that's great. But the problem is, most people are only looking at how does he stop behaviors, right? That's all they want to know. They're not looking at the totality of everything else that goes into that. And that's dog training. That's the dog training world, unfortunately. And it sucks, right? So maybe I'm a little too conservative at times, like with things with the e-collar and stuff, but it's because of that reason. I really started to see a long time ago how people's mind works and what they're going to do and how the dog is going to pay the price for it. Listen, if you're a great trainer, you have good skills, the e-collar is going to just amplify your ability, right? It's going to be a great thing. But if you're a shitty dog trainer, that tool is going to destroy dogs. Or you're a shitty dog handler in general, the tool is going to destroy the dog. And that's just the truth. And for anyone to deny that, you're kidding yourself. Or people will say, I'll get messages after people see this. Oh, you shouldn't say that. It gives ammunition to the force-free people. Listen, I'm always going to tell the truth. Whether I'm right or wrong, I have to correct myself all the time, but I'm always going to say my truth at that moment. And if I'm wrong, I'll come back and say I was wrong about that. And I've changed my mind about many things over the years. You know what I mean? All I could do is be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's the thing with when talking about the electric collar, and that's why I didn't want to turn this into a big thing of let's go over the differences in how you might approach the electric collar, because people are going to go out there, they're going to take whatever I say, and there's no information on it. There's very little information that's readily available on how I might use the electric collar, and people are going to mess up their dogs, and it's
no, I think you've done a good job with the questions. You've kind of hit on a lot of different things, and the last thing I want you to do is avoid a subject just because two people don't agree on something. So I think those are conversations that need to be had, right? And then you let the people decide, okay, what do I want to do? And then they may try one thing and I'm not comfortable with that. Let me try the other way. I I don't think people realize how much financially I invest in different world-class sport dog trainers that I
Oh
learn
yeah,
from,
yeah,
right?
absolutely.
I spend a lot of money.
Yeah,
And
same.
if I'm watching, let's say, if I'm watching Dave Croyer, who is phenomenal, and I push
Absolutely.
people toward it, and the way he teaches the front, let's say, when I try it, it's not for me, not because Dave's not doing a great job teaching it. I'm just uncomfortable, and maybe I'm not, like, it doesn't feed into my physical capabilities, right? But I like the way Tobias Olenek teaches that, and I use that, right? But I love the way Dave teaches this, and I love the way Ivan or Mia teaches this. I'm taking the information from the best people and utilizing what I can do, what suits me, my personality, my physical abilities, right? All my habits, my traits. I'm not looking for the quick fix. I'm learning from all of them. I'm learning how they teach this stuff from all of them and then just making it my own. And I'm going to make tons of mistakes in the beginning teaching this stuff, right? Then I'm going to go back and go, man, I wish I would have taught that this way, right? Dante, when I was teaching the heel flip and coming into competition healing, like I've done most of that with my Malinois, right? Well, the Shepherds move very different. That's why so many of the greats that have Shepherds in IGP teach the wraparound coming behind. I just don't like that, right? I don't like it. But I would have been better off with Dante. It took me longer to get his body to move like my two Malinois do. It's different. You learn that through trial and error. I don't belong to a club. So I did all my IGP training up to where I was with Dante by myself, everything, including all the bite work, everything. It's not because I think I can't learn from, no, I love learning from other people, but I like the struggle of learning through my errors. Like, that's important to me. I've always kind of liked to do things the harder way because I want it to be a learning experience for me and my dog. This is something we were doing together and we're going to learn together. Can I have gone to, one of the best clubs around and accelerated what we were doing? Fuck yeah, 100%. But I don't know if I could appreciate the process as much then. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think we're running a little bit over time, but
That's all right. I don't mind.
Malinois or German Shepherd, which one's going to be your next dog, Larry?
Oh, you son of a gun. I wish you didn't ask that. I go back and forth, right? And I don't know. There's things I love about both. I love that the Mals and January are a little smaller, a little more compact for travel, right? I like the speed of things and stuff. Listen, Dante, my shepherd that lost a leg, for me, he was the perfect sport dog for me. He has everything I want except that fourth leg. Now, everything. The thing that always scared me about him was he had the Malinois mentality in the German Shepherd body. And that always scared me. He was always hurting himself from day one because he's reckless. He was always reckless from the time he was a puppy. He's an absolute lunatic. Would I love another nice shepherd? I really would. But I think I have better access to some Malinois, and there are things like both my Malinois that I have, they're dream dogs. They're just phenomenal family dogs. They could do all the cool things. The attitude is there. The drive is there. So, man, I don't know. I have more options for Malinois. So I would imagine it's going to be a Malinois unless someone calls me and says, hey, I have this shepherd, this puppy. You gotta get him. He's everything you want. Then possible that too. As a matter of fact, I just said to my wife, look, I got to do this now. I'm ready. And what I do plan on doing, if I can, the second I get my puppy, I'm taking a road trip. Me and him, I'm driving out west, Montana, South Dakota, because I'm a massive believer on what happens when you travel with a dog in a good way. Yeah. It's massive. It is massive. So if I could take a week or two being on the road, staying in hotels, traveling with that puppy, man, it's going to be amazing right from the start.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure whatever dog you get, it's gonna be awesome to watch what you do with it. This will be our last question here, and this is one that really I'm very interested in. Um, what do you think of putting negative reinforcement on an intermittent schedule, using forward conditioning, not backwards or simultaneous?
Oh, listen, I'm a massive believer in negative reinforcement in teaching. Massive.
But negative reinforcement on an intermittent schedule.
How do you mean exactly?
So so we're still using forward conditioning. We're not
Hmm.
using backwards or simultaneous conditioning, but sometimes we use the aversive when the dog is not complying. Only when the dog is not complying, and sometimes we don't.
I used to do a lot of that with the e-collar, right? Now, when I use negative reinforcement, I'm thinking of really basic stuff, leash and collar. I tend to utilize it a lot before the dog has an opportunity to blow me off, right? I use it as a teaching tool. I'm not only using it when the dog hesitates or doesn't do, which there's nothing wrong with that. But like, I was literally probably going to make a video about a very specific dog at the last seminar that really, really struggled, like really was just a shell of a dog, and why I turned to negative reinforcement with that dog. Why I didn't wait for the dog not to comply, because I do think it's an extremely powerful tool, right? I wouldn't say I use it intermittently so much, but I tend to utilize it pretty quickly after giving commands without giving the dog the opportunity to blow things off. But then there's going to be times too where I start to test where we're at, and I do give the dog the opportunity to comply before I have an option of utilizing it. Does that make sense? But I never purposely like go out to train using negative reinforcement intermittently. Like, I don't put that in my head. That's not a goal that I'm doing. It's going to be sit, pop, 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 good job. Sit, pop, 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 right away.
There's for me, there's only one place where I've been experimenting with this, and I've done it with quite a few dogs now, and it's with the recall. I use right from the very start. The negative reinforcement is on an intermittent schedule, whether we're using the electric collar, long line, whatever it is, and that's where I've been playing around with it. There's not many other places where I can see there being a huge benefit in it. But yeah, that's
Well, it's if you look at the e-collar stuff I've put out over the years, I did a lot of that with the e-collar, right? When I think of negative reinforcement now, I use a leash a lot more than an e-collar. So when I talk about that intermittent phase with the e-collar, that's where I would utilize what you're talking about a little more. As opposed to when I think negative reinforcement now, I'm always thinking leash, collar, teaching behaviors to the dog.
So that's something with the intermittent phase in your book.
Yeah.
I don't know if you said whether you're using forwards, backwards, or simultaneous
Both.
conditioning.
Both.
So you're using both in the intermittent phase as well as the
So in the
conditioning.
beginning, only in the beginning of the intermittent phase will I use backward conditioning. Okay. Just in the beginning. But then quickly I'm moving to using it more intermittently, only using forward conditioning. Right. So an example, let's say I was going to take a dog out. I'll take one behavior. Let's just use a place command. Right. I'm going to utilize all four different, and to be honest, I don't do that much anymore. Even I spend so little time going through the e-collar stuff. I breeze over that very, very quickly. But that's the one example of what you're talking where I would use more of the negative reinforcement in an intermittent way.
Right. And would you use it still? So say you decide on this repetition, you're not going to use the electric collar. And on that repetition, the dog says, no, I'm not going to place, or no, I'm not going to come back to you, would you then change your mind and say, okay, now we're going to have to use the electric collar or the
100%.
lead, or
100%.
would you still
Yes.
continue
No,
with
no,
the
no.
intermittent
No,
schedule?
I'm using the e-collar there. And in fact, that's something that people make the mistake, right? Because
Really?
they get so loyal, and it's like a religious thing. Oh no, this time I was calling the dog without the e-collar and he didn't come to me. What should I have done? Use the e-collar. Yeah, but I wasn't going to use. Yeah, but he gave you an opportunity to use it. That's a learning opportunity. So in that stage of things, I want the dog to blow us off or make some mistakes. For one, so we could start adding a little more pressure. We're not using lowest levels perceived here, right? We're using more pressure, and we're looking for those moments that the dog does blow us off, so we can teach him, hey, this is how you avoid this in the future. So when we get to the situations that are serious and the dog goes into higher drive, we've already established how to avoid that.
Yeah, that's where there's a slight difference there. Like I have been like if it's an intermittent schedule and you're using forward conditioning, then you set for me at least, you set the schedule of reinforcement, and whether the dog comes back to you, if the dog comes back to you, then of course you're not going to use it. But if the dog does decide not to come back to you, then I wouldn't use the electric collar if that's what we're meant to be doing. If that's how it should be on that repetition of the. I don't know if I'm explaining this well enough, but
no. And here's the problem with this, William.
It's
when we start talking about backward conditioning, forward conditioning, all those things,
Yeah.
people don't give a fuck about that. And what it does is it confuses people. Again, when you're talking about the mass numbers out there, too many dog trainers market themselves to other fucking dog trainers, right? They want to impress each other. Look what I know. Look at my dog. Look at this. You're talking to dog trainers.
No, I'm just, at least for me, I'm just really interested
Well,
in what you think
sure.
in your perspective.
So when we start talking like that, right?
Yeah.
For the average person, and probably most dog trainers, it goes whoop, right over their head. Now we add mass confusion.
Mm-hmm.
So when we talk about adding an intermittent schedule with negative reinforcement, right there, it's too much for people, right? And so if I tell someone, okay, recall your dog, don't use the e-collar, and then they call the dog, and so maybe you have to change the wording as call the dog, utilize the e-collar only if you have to, if the dog blows you off, right? You have to be very specific, because people will take what you say and like live by it 100% without thinking.
Yeah. So with the intermittent schedule, for me, even if the dog blows you off, if you're on the repetition where you shouldn't be using the electric collar, then I would not use it. I would allow the dog to. So there's a few reasons why I use the intermittent schedule. One of them is that it's a lot harder for the dog to make that association back to, say, if we're using the electric collar, it's very hard for the dog to make that association and
make the association in which way?
Become collar wise. So it's a lot harder for the dog to say, okay, I'm getting the stimulation, and it's because of this electric collar that's around my neck. At least that's what I've experienced with the dogs that I've tried this with. And it also, as well, like in the future, like many times a dog might not be collar wise. Like you could do the training very well. The dog's not collar wise. They don't know that it's the electric collar itself that's controlling their behavior, and the person takes the electric collar off the dog. They let the dog out, and maybe it goes well for a while, and then they recall the dog, and the dog decides, no, I'm not going to come back. And it's at that moment where they realize, okay, I know what it was this whole time that was controlling my behavior, because every time before this, it's been each time I fail the recall, there's stimulation that makes me makes me come back. There's that negative reinforcement. Yeah, so, and then it's at that moment where the dog realizes, okay, what's the difference here? I'm not wearing this collar. Whereas if it was at an intermittent schedule already, then the dog can say, well, I've experienced this before with the collar on, where I've not recalled, and there's been no consequence for that. And yeah, so it's mainly the main reason why I think it's really good. And another reason would be also that in the same way that when you put positive reinforcement on an intermittent schedule, learning never fully completes. So the dog never really learns, okay, this is what predicts the reward, and this is learning never really completes with the positive reinforcement.
If you recall the dog, and again, like, this is where people are going to turn off the podcast. They're like,
I'm sure they are.
Right. This is where it gets where it's no longer beneficial. But if you give the command and the dog doesn't respond, what are you doing?
It depends on if on that repetition I've decided that I'm going to use the electric collar.
No, you've decided you're not going to. You're not. You've decided.
If I've decided that I'm not going to, then I'm not going to use the electric collar.
What are you going to do?
Nothing.
So you're going to let the dog blow you off?
Yes.
Yeah, I would never do that, ever.
Yeah. Oh, I know it's.
But
yeah.
But also, like, for me, if you have to, like, if your dog acts differently with the collar on than off, that's a problem to me.
Yeah.
Right. There should be no difference as far as I'm concerned. And so I've never run into those. Like, I don't run into those issues because that's very important to me. The dog shouldn't be different with the collar on and collar off. Are there going to be some dogs that are very, very wise and totally understand when the collar's on, when it's not? Absolutely. 100%. Right. But I think it's a massive mistake to give a recall or any command to a dog and then just say, oh, fuck it, he didn't comply, I'm not going to reinforce that. Like, I'm not going to do that. Right. Like, if I said, okay, for some reason, I'm not going to utilize the e-collar here, no matter what, there still has to be something where I let that dog know, unacceptable. You can't do that. Like, you have to come to me when called. You understand? Because to me, that's actually a extremely valuable learning opportunity for the dog that you're missing by not telling him, you don't have a choice, dude. You have to come to me.
So there are times where that is the case. It's just that there's also times where it's not the case, and eventually as well, of course, the dog does come back every single time. You know, you see any of the dogs, they don't stay in this, oh, sometimes they come back, sometimes they don't. It's a very brief period that they go through, where they go from not coming back on some repetitions, and this will happen automatically in the early stages of learning anyway. It's a very brief period, and then eventually they decide, well, the chances of me, the potential of there being that consequence there is enough for me to want to avoid it just in case it happens.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to me, but it doesn't have to. And and again, what I said before counts. In the end, the only thing I care about, what do your dogs look like?
Yeah.
Right. Can you listen? No matter if you're force-free, so-called balanced, pet dog trainer, sport dog trainer, right? Any of that stuff. I don't know if anyone could disagree. Maybe there are people that disagree, but I would think that everyone could agree on one thing, and that is, in the end, you should be able to put your dog in any situation within reason with no tools and no food and no toys, and have that dog respond to you properly.
Absolutely.
Like, if everyone's not training for that, I would ask why, right? Doesn't mean you have to train the same way, but isn't that the end goal? Like, that the dog responds to you with no tools on? right? Because I could show you that with any dog I've ever owned. Doesn't mean I'm the best dog trainer in the world, but I see people that talk so much shit that can't do that. They don't have that, not even close. So I'm halfway decent at developing really good dogs that want to. They're not because they're scared. They don't, but they want. If I take my dogs out to the farm where I hunt and we're out there looking for shed antlers, like they're having a blast, right? But if they get 50, 75 yards away, they're looking to make sure I'm still there. They don't want to leave me. If a herd of deer take off out in front of them, they don't care. They don't chase them. Not because they're scared to. They truly don't want to, right? Because I give them that fulfillment they need. And it's not something that they're like fighting. Oh, I want to chase those deer. No, we're doing cool things right now, me and you. And that's just enough for them normally. That's without tools on. You understand? So I have no problem taking my dogs out to the farms or out in public without e-collars on. None. And it's not even something I worry about. And if you or anyone out there, when I say you, I mean in general, if people can do that, that's what I want for you, right? However you train to get there, I'm not going to disagree with you because your dog is telling me what you did was good. Your dog is upbeat, it's happy, it feels good about itself, and it also is crazy about you. It trusts you, it wants to be with you. So whatever you did, hey, keep doing it, right? I know what works for me, and it's worked for a lot of people. A lot of people. Like I said, tens of thousands of people. My wife, who started helping me this year, like I never shared emails with her and messages, right? She gets to see it. Like you get people from all over the world saying, look, I've been through 3 board and trains, 4 board and trains. Like I literally just watched your videos and my dog is off leash and happy. That's important to me. But that's why I do things the way I do. Doesn't mean it's the only way. May not even be the best way, right? But I think it's the way that benefits the most people. You get the most bang for your buck with the everyday dog owner, with the everyday average dog, you know?
And that's exactly why I said what I said at the start, that if you're struggling with your dog, you're absolutely one of the best dog trainers you can learn from.
I appreciate that, William.
But yeah, the negative reinforcement, I just really just wanted to see what you think, and you don't use it, and that's okay. And yeah, it's good. That's the only reason why I'm doing this, is so that I could selfishly get some information from you as a dog trainer.
Yeah,
I respect you a lot. I respect you a
well,
lot.
thank you. Listen, I'm real simple, I'm real basic. And I'm sure I do things sometimes that I don't even realize I'm doing. You know what I mean? And then like sometimes one thing nice about watching podcasts or listening to other people, sometimes you learn something you already knew and you used to do. And for some reason, you just stopped doing it 10 years ago. And you're like, oh man, like I forgot about that. That's like super beneficial. You know what I mean? And that's why it's great to talk to other people in the dog industry who are doing good things. Unfortunately, a lot of times you get the biggest platforms and the biggest voices that just are massive on social media, but really just don't have the skill or experience that most people would believe they have.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's hard.
You see some of these big dog trainers, and some of them are really, really good. Like you're fantastic. And you'd think that with the amount of following and they obviously make more than enough money off of what they're doing.
Sure.
You'd think they would go and get as high level education as they can. They would go to the best academics, the best dog trainers, the best of everything to become the best dog trainer in the world. I mean, for me, I'm addicted to this stuff. I'm absolutely addicted to anything to do with dog training, animals, the psychology.
Whatever. Well, here's the thing. The reason I agreed to do your podcast, I don't do a lot of them anymore. I usually politely decline, but I do think that you have a real desire to constantly be learning this stuff. And that was a big part of it for me. Why I said yeah, because I don't think you're doing it for social media clout or anything.
All right, Larry. thank you for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me, buddy.
Is there anything you would like to add before we end the podcast?
No, listen, you seem, I've never met you. You seem like a young guy with real good intentions. It looks like learning from the best of the best. That's important. So I hope you have a lot of success. I hope you do great. I really do. And again, that's why I said yes to doing this. I think your heart's in the right place.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Bye, everyone. And thanks for listening to the Super Canine Show with Larry Krohn and me, William Chandler-Duff.